What's up, you guys? This is Professor Ron with OneHourProfessor.com, and today we're going to talk about how to sell a website online. So selling a website, if you're even watching this video, you've obviously got some type of website, you're curious about this, and you're looking to sell it, and that's amazing. And the reason why that's amazing is because you're not really selling a website here, you're selling a business, okay? Don't be fooled, websites are a business. So if you're at the point to where you have been able to build a business from scratch and now you're able to sell it to somebody, right? It's time for you to actually exit that business. That's incredible because you have built something from the ground up, and I'll give you all the congratulations in the world. It's a great time. But knowing how to do it correctly can be a little bit, especially if you're not familiar with it, can be a little bit scary. So today's video is going to explain how to do that. What we're going to discuss is we are going to discuss where you should actually sell your website, how to figure out how much your website is worth. We'll talk about what to expect when you're actually selling your website, how to make sure the sale of your website is safe, and then finally, we'll talk about how to get the best offer for your site. So why should you trust me? Well, I could sit here and explain all the different reasons and how I've been in an online business for over 7 years and how I have a YouTube channel, which you're watching right now, which is pretty successful, but a website that's even more successful over at OneHourProfessor.com that you can check out if you'd like. But at the end of the day, I guess what I should really just tell you is that I have sold over $300,000 worth of websites. So I know what I'm talking about. I've done this quite a few times, and I know what it takes to successfully sell a website online. So that said, where do you actually sell a website? Well, when you're trying to sell a website, there's something that's really, really important that you have to pay attention to. And that is most of the brokers out there, right? They call it a success fee. So what is a success fee? This is usually a percentage of the sale. This can be a really big deal because this means that if you sell a site for $100,000 and they take 10%, they make $10,000 on the sale. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking is, well, why would I go through a broker if I can just find my own buyer? When was the last time that you were approached by someone who said, I want to buy a website. I want to buy your website. Maybe you've had that happen, but not likely. I'm just going to be honest with you. So these brokers are great places because they are where buyers, right, of sites will actually gather, and they'll all be coming and looking through the listings, and there will be competition, and there's all these different things that happen which are positive. And there's some that are auction style, others there you can just buy it for a flat fee, all these different things. So at the end of the day, it's better to go with a broker because they have those buyers that are willing to just immediately purchase your site that you built, right? So let me talk about some of these brokers, kind of the top ones that most people are familiar with, and I'll also talk a little bit about their success fees. Now, I do want to say before I jump into this, if you would be so kind, please use the links below to get to these brokers. It allows me to make a little bit of income from them for referring you over, which helps me continue to create these videos, right? These videos aren't free. It takes my time. I got to pay an editor. I got to pay someone to upload. I got to pay all these different things to make these happen. So please, if you would do that, I would appreciate it. But that said, let's get in here. So the first one here is Flippa. Now, Flippa is really the number one, they say it right here, number one marketplace to buy and sell. It is the biggest by far, okay? It's a whole site devoted to this and is really great for small to medium-sized sites, which probably most of you have, but even big ones. There is definitely an audience here of people who are looking for those big acquisitions as well, right? So this is Flippa. This is probably the number one place. Again, use the link below if you do that. In terms of the pricing and the success fees, this is how they break it down. So up to $50,000, they take 10%. So if your site is $50,000 or under, they take 10%. If your site is $50,000 or $50,001 to $100,000, it is a 7.5% success fee. If it is over $100,000, it's a 5% success fee. And then they have partner brokers. They have some partner brokers that they work with. That's a 15% success fee, which is relatively high. So anyways, these are the success fees with Flippa, which aren't too crazy. And frankly, compared to some of the others, it's lower. Some it's equal, but some it's lower. Next would be Motion Invest. Now, Motion Invest is a very interesting site. I know the people who created Motion Invest. It's smaller. It's not a huge marketplace. But the nice thing about Motion Invest is that they are willing to buy profitable sites, right? They will buy them for very cheap. So if you're looking to sell your own site, right, and you're trying to sell your own site, and they usually will deal with smaller sites. I don't know exactly how big is too big with Motion Invest. I don't have that information. But what you could do is you can go to them and say, hey, I have this particular site. Can you give me a valuation on it? All these platforms will give you a valuation for free. Why? Because they want you to choose them. So they want to talk to you anyway. It's kind of like a free estimate, right? So they will do that. Motion Invest is typically for the smaller sites, maybe the medium ones, not really all that great for the big ones, but for the smaller to medium, they are willing to work with you and they'll buy them directly, which is nice because when you sell to Motion Invest, you're selling to the people behind the site. You're not necessarily selling to someone else. You're selling to the people on the site. They'll take it in, they may do a few things, and then later they'll sell the site, which is, a good place to, a good business to work with because you could just get the cash really quick. Next is Quiet Light Brokerage. Now, Quiet Light Brokerage, they are typically the medium to larger sites. They don't deal as much with the smaller sites. They can, I believe, but I don't know what the minimums are with them. Okay, so Quiet Light Brokerage is a bigger one. In terms of the fees, I had to go to a third party for this one because I couldn't find it listed on their site. This is what this third party says. Okay, so they say 10% from $0 to $1 million, $1 million site, so 0 to $1 million, which is where most of us would fall, right? 0 to $1 million is 10% success fee. And then they have breakdown. You can see it. I'm not going to sit here and explain this, but this is the success fees for how they've broken down according to this website. I haven't verified this with Quiet Light Brokerage, but I'm just going to have to go with this information because it's the best I have. Next is Empire Flippers. This is a big one. They have grown over time, and the cool thing about Empire Flippers is that they're very transparent about the way that they do things, and they've been doing this for years. They have a podcast. So they're really good. They typically also focus on the medium to larger sites, like over 100,000. They don't focus too much under that because it takes a lot of work to put them, to put it all together regardless of the size of the site. So when you're working on sites that are under 100,000, it takes more time and more money, et cetera. In terms of how much the fees are for their success fees. So basically anything under $1 million is 15%. For businesses between 1 to 2 million, 12%, et cetera, right? They break it all down right over here. So here's the thing with all these. You're probably wondering, well, which one's the best one? If you have a smaller to medium, I highly recommend Flippa or Motion Invest, right? Those are usually going to be good ones. For the higher tier ones, you can kind of debate. You can use Flippa for that, or you can go to Quiet Light or Empire Flippers. The thing is that you have to understand with these different brokers are that they have different buyer pools. Okay. So while Flippa has probably the most, they may not have really high net worth people. Okay. They do have some, and I know that from experience, but they don't have all of them that maybe Empire Flippers does, where they have all this, all these networks of these really high net worth individuals who are always looking for these sites. So that's kind of what you're wrestling with when you're choosing a marketplace. But if you're small to medium, which I think most of you probably are, then Flippa is just fine. And again, if you'd use my link in the description below, I would appreciate it to support me. So now, if you're still new to this, you're probably wondering, okay, well, I got the site. I want to sell it. I'm ready to sell it. So how do you figure out how much your website is worth? So at the end of the day, the valuation of a site can be based on a few things. But if you're thinking, oh, I put in a bunch of hard work and you have less than 50 people a month, trying to buy your site or whatever it is that you've built, forget about it. You're not going to sell it for much. You might sell it for $500, maybe $1,000 to the right buyer. Generally speaking, site valuations are based on profit, not revenue. So nobody cares if you have $10,000 a month in revenue, but you have $100 in profit. They're going to base it on the $100 of profit, right? Because when anybody's buying a business, they're worried about the profit, not necessarily the revenue. Revenue can be kind of a small part of the deal and they may say, okay, well, it's at here with revenue and we could double that, blah, blah. But generally speaking, they're going to focus on profit. Usually, in terms of the way to value this and figure this out, is that it is based on 25 to 35 times the monthly profit, okay? So what does this mean? Simple math. If your site makes $100 a month, okay, $100 a month consistently, and it's done that for 6 months. If you're making $100 a month, a buyer would look at that and then they would say, okay, well, I would be willing to buy this site somewhere between the range of $2,500 to $3,500. That's typically what you're going to get. Now you're wondering, how does it go from 25,000 or 2,500 to 3,500? Like why would there be such a difference between the two, right? It really depends on a bunch of different factors. So it depends on your actual revenue, right? The total revenue is a factor because someone may say, well, they have this much revenue. I could probably scale back and save some of that revenue and convert it over to profit, right? So revenue and income, right, is the first one. The traffic sources. So this is important. If you are getting all of your traffic from social media, right, or from an email list or something like that, it's only valuable if that person has that skill set. So if you have a site that's getting 100,000 views a month and making $10,000, but it's all social media, you're going to have to find the perfect buyer who understands that model, or you're not going to get as much money because someone's like, well, I don't really know social media that much. I don't really know how to do that. Typically with this, the traffic sources, if you're getting organic traffic, meaning from search engines, Google, Bing, Yahoo, all these other guys, if you're getting traffic from them, that's your best bet. Okay. That's what's usually going to be the best valuation that you're going to get. Next is the country. So if you're in the United States or other English-speaking countries that are established and have high amount of advertisers, you're going to get the most for your money because that's what makes the most money, right? Typically. That said, if your country is a different country and you're still bringing in consistent revenue, you can still sell your site for a good amount of money. But understand that the buyer pool, a lot of people like sites in America, Canada, Australia, England, all these different areas that are, as you would say, first world countries, right? Like the ones that are all established. But that doesn't mean if you have a site in, a different country that's not as well established that you can't make money from it. You still can. Just consider that when you're looking at how much the site will sell for, that some people may not pay as much if it's in a different country or really focused on that. Next is a backlink profile. So this is basically how many sites have linked to your site, okay? And the way in which they've linked to your site. So if you've just earned a bunch of media, meaning you got featured in the news and there's a bunch of backlinks, that's great. Or if you're somewhat of an authority in a particular niche and you're organically getting backlinks, that's great. Generally speaking, that's going to be a part of the purchase and the buyer, when they're looking to buy it, they're going to say, well, what's the backlink profile? Also trends. So if you're trending up, guess what? You're going to make more. If your site is trending down in traffic and earnings, you're not going to make as much. Why? Because think about it. If you were buying a site, why would you pay a premium when a site is going down? You wouldn't. You'd only want to pay a premium when it's going up. But if it's pretty flat and pretty stagnant and up a little bit every month, the variance is really small, then that's a pretty even keel site and a good time to sell it as well. And then lastly would be other assets. So this is another part of the valuation. When it comes to other assets, we're talking about email lists. We're talking about social media profiles, all those other things that you've built up with the site in conjunction with the site that you can sell with it. So if you have a Facebook group of 100,000 people that's super active and really good, you will probably get a higher valuation than someone that just has a site. Why? Because it's another way for the new buyer to market their platform to those people. Okay. So now what is it that you should expect when you sell a site? Okay. I've gone through this quite a few times myself. What is it that you should expect? First, you're going to answer a lot of different emails. Okay. And in those emails, you are going to give a lot of people access to your Google Analytics. And by the way, if you don't have Google Analytics and Google Search Console on your site right now, put it on your website immediately. Because without that, most people are going to be kind of like, any serious buyer is going to be, I don't even know, what's the traffic here? It's really hard for people to verify things. So that should be on your site already. Assuming it is, typically what's going to happen is you're going to answer a lot of emails. A lot of people are going to say, hey, so-and-so, can you give me access to Google Analytics? And you say, yep. And then you're giving them all access to allow them to review the information about the site and verify what you're saying. Okay. You're also probably going to have some calls, maybe not a crazy amount of calls. Usually the higher the price of the site, the more calls you're going to have, right? Because people want more than just a random stranger behind, just sending emails. They want someone that they can actually see, talk to, do a Zoom with, that sort of thing. So you may have some calls if it's a smaller site, but maybe not a crazy amount of them, but the larger it is, you'll have some calls. And then I just have to say it, get ready to be annoyed. It happens. So what you're going to find too is every time that I've sold a site, you're going to get some people that come, hey, can I get Google Analytics access? And they ask all these frankly, not very smart questions because they're probably kind of really beginner maybe, or maybe they just don't really know stuff. And you're kind of like, why are you, it's almost like you're kicking the tires here, right? You're not really interested in buying the site. You maybe just want to steal the idea and do it on your own, or, you're just not all that sure of it or whatever. So just be ready to be a little bit annoyed. You're probably going to get annoyed by some people, but you have to be careful because someone that may annoy you at first may be the person that's willing to buy it for the most later. So remember that. So how do you make sure that the sale of your site is safe, right? Because if you just take someone, through emails and they're like, yeah, just send it all over and give me the domain and give me the site. And you're like, okay. And then you just do it. And then you're like, okay, it's all there. You have to pay me. They could just walk away. And this is the internet, which is a scary place, right? People love scamming people. So how do you make sure that it's safe? Well, first off, I recommend a brokerage, right? Like I said, Flippa, all these other guys that I had already pointed out, I recommend that you go through one because there's already that buyer pool there and they help make that whole process safe for you as a seller. That's very important. But if you don't want to go through a broker, maybe someone personally has said, hey, I want to buy your site. How can we do this? At the very least, you should use escrow.com. Okay. They charge a minimal fee for what they do. But basically what they do is they make it so that the buyer says, hey, I want to buy your site. And then you say, okay, it's going to be $10,000, for instance. Okay, I'm going to charge you $10,000. They say, okay, great. 10,000 is fair. Let's go from there. They then take their $10,000, they put it into escrow.com. They enter into a contract with you saying that you guys are going to sell the assets and everything like that, or transfer the assets. At that point, their money is parked, hidden, and in escrow.com, which is great because now you can transfer everything, send it to them. And then once they approve that transfer, they give you the money, right? That's how escrow works. It's an intermediary, a third-party intermediary that holds the funds for you while the whole thing goes through, which is great. So at the very least, use escrow.com, but I recommend that you use a broker if you haven't already tried to do so. So how do you get the best offer for your site? Well, there's a few different things to think about here. First off is that your profit is crucial, okay? Not the revenue, but the profit. So at least if you can, 3 to 6 months prior to selling your site, pull back on your expenses as much as you can without killing the site, right? Pull back on your expenses. Why do you do this? Because in 3 to 6 months, you're able to say, hey, you know what? This site makes X amount of dollars every single month, right? And you're no longer accounting for all the other expenses that you had, okay? So because you're not accounting for all those expenses, you could then take a site that, was making $700 a month with expenses, and now you could change it to $1,000 a month, all right? So let's do some math behind that. If you sell a site for 30x, so 30 times your monthly profit, right? And you have $700 a month, that's the actual profit at the end of the day. That site would end up selling for $21,000, which is a good chunk of money, right? But let's say you pulled back on those expenses and you said, you know what, we're going to pull back. We're going to sell this thing in 3, 6 months, whatever it is. We're going to sell this thing. And you pulled it back to where instead of $700 a month, you're making $1,000 of profit a month. Now you turn to sell that site, right? In that time frame, you would end up getting $1,000 times 30x. You'd end up getting $30,000. That's a difference of $9,000 by simply reducing your costs when you're in that sale period. Highly recommend that you do that if you're looking to sell and you're able to have a little bit of time before the sale of the site itself. Next is to be trending upwards, not downwards, right? I talked about it earlier, but if you're looking to get a site, you're not going to want to jump in when it's already, cratering, and going down. That's not the best time to jump into a site, right? You don't want to get it on the downward swing. You want to get it when it's going upwards. So if you are, in the mode where it's growing, and you're like, okay, I just need to sell this thing. I'm not working on it enough or whatever the reason. It's a great time to sell the site when it's going upwards or worst case, stagnant. You don't really want to sell a site when it's going down because when it's going down, you're not going to get the premium that you otherwise would have gotten. Next is don't do shady things. Pretty self-explanatory. Don't build a bunch of shady links to a site. Don't do things to fake your earnings. Just don't do it. Just don't be that guy or that girl. Don't do it. It doesn't make sense to do that in the long term. It's going to hurt your reputation. And at the end of the day, if you do that and you get caught with it and someone catches you that's buying the site, they're going to point it out. And guess what? The deal is off. And then they're going to talk all the trash about you. It's just not a good idea. So don't do shady things. Next, and one that isn't talked about all that often, is to make sure that the listing that you put, whatever broker you use, make sure that you make it really, really thorough. Okay. Detail everything. Explain why you're selling the site. Explain about yourself. Explain how you grew it. Everything. more information is better here. The more information that you can tell, the story behind the site to help people understand who you are and why you're selling this site and how it's done over time is very, very important. So be very thorough with the listing that you create or that is created for you to make sure that the person who may end up buying your site makes that connection and understands, what the site is all about. Next is to create revenue videos, not just screenshots, right? So depending on the broker, sometimes they say, hey, where's a screenshot, right? They want screenshots of, your AdSense account or eZoic or whatever it is, or, affiliate income, all these different things. That's great. You can include some screenshots, but I urge you to also create a revenue video, okay? What this means is you go into all the different platforms where you're making revenue, you break it down to whatever time frame makes sense, and you create a video and you talk through each and you scroll and you show people, you refresh the page, you show them, hey, this is real revenue, okay? This is going to build up all that trust that people will have in you to help them understand this is real revenue, this is a real business. Here's all the ways that I make money. When you're refreshing pages, you're showing them this isn't Photoshop, nothing like that. It'll really help build the trust, especially with the individuals that have the money to buy these things. They want to make sure that they're getting into a good investment. So that'll help them have that trust in you. And lastly, one point that I just have to mention that I already mentioned earlier, make sure that you treat everyone equal, because yes, you will get annoyed. And there will be people that seem like tire kickers. They want to have a call or maybe 2 calls and you're like, geez, why is this person bothering so much? They're bothering you so much because they want to buy your site, right? They see the value in it. So make sure that anybody that you're working with, you're nice, you're courteous, and you help them as much as you can because, and I've had this happen, you never know which person that you're selling sites to, you never know which one's going to buy it. And if you're nice to 3 or 4 people and they like you personally and they like the site, there could very well be a bidding war for your site, which is the best possible scenario because now you are able to make even more money than you would have otherwise. So there it is, you guys. I hope that this video helped you understand how to sell a website online. As always, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to help you out. And otherwise, please make sure that you like this video so that YouTube recommends it to others and subscribe to the channel so that you become part of my community. Thanks, guys, as always, and I will see you in the next one.